computer. Yay. So a whole bunch of things to talk about. Number one, I hope to have your exams done by this weekend, late this weekend, maybe into Monday morning. So we can talk about them next week. And I can just give you a few general I'll be making specific comments on your exams, but I also will probably just in looking at the aggregate performance and I'll give you some things to focus on. And if you have more specific questions pertaining to your exam in particular, we can talk about that either at the end of class or via email or some such, or if I happen to make a remark and it's not perfectly clear what I'm saying or why the grade was the way it was, so on and so forth. So that's one thing. The next thing is that tomorrow I'm going to put up the final exam, and it's going to cover the Odyssey and Othello. Right? So you'll have those questions then, and tomorrow I will establish the due date. Obviously, that means you have a super extended period of time. And of course, the question on the Odyssey, you literally could jump right into it and start working on it. And obviously, Othello, you're gonna want to wait until we have class discussion and we wade more into Othello on that point. But I think the due date is going to be on a little bit the earlier side, but I'm getting it to you with almost probably a month to do it. I just want it there. I want people to be able to pace themselves at their own rate. Since I'm giving it to you so early, the last thing you want to do is wait to do it until the last minute. And it just gives you more opportunity to have that grade within your own grasp, your own control. What else? So next week we're going to start Othello, right? And I think Othello is going to be our last reading for the semester. Let me clarify. I've got some things floating around on like the discussion board from previous semesters of some readings that I covered that we're not covering this semester. So please just make sure to ignore any of those. That the only discussion board that you're ever going to do is the one that's linked to in the module. So the module for Othello will be up tomorrow at some point. So you'll see what the assignment is in terms of the details of it. So let me talk for a few minutes about Othello because it's going to be what we're going to be reading for next week. And I should also say that going forward, we're going to be meeting twice a week for the remainder of the semester. Let me also say that, I've given you a ton of videos with the Odyssey, but we've also been only meeting once a week for a handful of weeks now, on top of the fact that we had spring break. So you've had the time to stay up with those videos. And it's really crucial that you cover those videos because they have material that's going to pertain specifically to the final exam. I've provided lots of bits. And in class, I mean, I'm going to give a kind of do a little summation of some of those videos and PowerPoints today when we talk about the opening lines of the poem. And what we'll do today will really establish a kind of general understanding of some things that in those videos I go in a little more depth in, and so on. So Othello, we're going to read Shakespeare. The first challenge with Shakespeare is Shakespeare's language, right? Remember, it's a play. It's all mimetic in the sense that it's the representation of dialogue and there's no narration. One thing narration does in the short story, one thing narration does in the novel is it helps to situate the reader in terms of the situation, the context, the setting, the conflict. The narrator just tells you what's going on a lot of the times and makes it very clear. When we look at the opening lines of the Odyssey, for example, Homer, as the narrator, makes very clear what's going on. There's no ambiguity. Right? When we turn to the realm of drama, there's a kind of fundamental ambiguity about what's going on, precisely because we just get speech rather than depicted speech rather than narration. And by definition, part of what a narrator does is to explain what's going on to the reader. Um, so there's a particular challenge, if not because it's Shakespeare, but simply because it's a drama. And Alfred Hitchcock, the famous director, has a really great line. He says, bad movies and bad writing for movies has the characters standing around explaining the plot to you. Bad movies, bad plays, bad television uh, have the character, what does he say? The characters stand around explaining the plot to you. And he says exactly what you don't want in a great film or a good film or a good TV show is characters standing around explaining the plot to you, right? So if you ever watch like a sitcom or just a really boiled down television show where it's really obvious as to what's going on, you very often have exactly what Hitchcock says you shouldn't do in a good drama, which is the characters stand around and explain what's going on because they don't believe that the audience can figure out what's going on by inferring from what's being said. So the challenge of Shakespeare, simply as being a dramatist and writing plays rather than novels or short stories, is that we have to figure out what's going on. We have to figure out something about the setting. Uh, we have to figure something about the characters from what they say rather than from a narrator talking about them. So that's one interesting challenge. The second challenge with Shakespeare is his language, right? Um, there's a great line by, I can't remember who it is, but it's about the philosopher Martin Heidegger, famous German existential philosopher, wrote Being in Time. And if you've ever opened one of his books, perchance, you'll notice that it's really hard to understand what the heck he's talking about. And someone quipped that Heidegger is hard to translate even into German. Heidegger's hard to translate even into German. And of course, the irony is that he was writing in German. And of course, you wouldn't think he'd need to be translated into German because he's already speaking in German. But it points to the unusual way in which he used language, his unusual use of certain terms that are foreign for the innocent, for the uninitiated reader, right? And Shakespeare has a little bit of that same quality, that Shakespeare can be hard to understand, hard to translate even into English. For two primary, well, about three primary reasons. Number one is his grammatical structure. He uses grammatical structures that are not the ordinary types of structures, kind of subject predicate structures that we use today. In many cases, he'll reverse grammatical structure. He'll leave parts of grammatical structure out that are implied by what's already been stated. And so he plays with the structure of language, and that becomes one challenge to understanding Shakespeare as you read. Number two is not just his grammar, but his language, his specific choice of words. And there's two challenges that are rather interesting. Number one is he'll use words that we simply don't use in modern English anymore. So he's writing at the end of the 16th, beginning of the 17th centuries, the so-called Elizabethan period, because Queen Elizabeth was sitting on the throne, Queen Elizabeth number one, as opposed to the one who's on the throne now. And he just employs words that had currency in that day, but don't in ours, right? So that's one challenge. The other thing that's equally problematic is that he uses words that we're all familiar with, meaning we've heard them before 1,000 times, but he uses them in ways with meanings that are no longer operative on the everyday level in our use of English, right? So you'll see words that you're familiar with, but you realize he's using them in a different way, right? The last thing that makes Shakespeare's language challenging and makes him therefore a challenge to read is the fact that he's writing plays that are intended to be performed and spoken and acted by actors, right? So it's really hard to get the flavor of Shakespeare's language when you just read it, as opposed to hear it, if not see it acted out, both with the cadence of the speaker, the emphasis of the speaker, and the delivery of the speaker, but also the body language of the speaker. So you lose all these dimensions of information or dimensions of meaning that would help inform you about the meaning of what's being said, right? So there's two key things we're going to do to kind of resuscitate the play into a living thing. Number one is I'm going to provide just a little plot summary as a kind of study guide in the assignment module, right? So that means that you will be able to just read it. It will be something like a kind of something like a Cliff Notes to give you a general idea of it's a 5-act play, general idea of what the plot is and what happens in each act of the play, and a little bit about each of the characters, although we'll have more of that in the PowerPoints and the video introduction that I'm going to post. The other thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to ask you to watch a film version of Othello that was produced in the 1990s. I want to say 95 or 96 by Kenneth Branagh, and it stars Larry Fishburne. I guess he goes by Lawrence Fishburne now, but he's a great actor. You've probably seen him in The Matrix. Or in there's a television show he's done in the last 5, 6, 7 years. I think it's Blackish. Larry Fishburne. He was in Apocalypse Now as a very young soldier. If you know Apocalypse Now, the Stanley Kubrick film. And so it's a really great production in which is really pretty faithful to the original play. There's certain scenes and dialogue edited out just in the interest you can't film the whole thing. But it really captures, I think, fairly faithfully the spirit of Shakespeare and what he's about in this play. And we'll find out he's about a lot of things. But I think once you read the play and then you watch the film, you'll really, those words will be brought to life. And when you have the context of the plot, those things will be very intelligible to you. And you'll start to get the feel of what's being said and the language and the meaning. One of the most daunting things with Shakespeare is, I mean, how many people have either seen a Shakespeare play live or watched a film version? Who's done that? Three people. Four. Okay, more. Can I ask someone, what was it like the first time you watched a play by Shakespeare?
Dramatic.
The very first time.
Very
Particularly
dramatic.
in terms of the language.
I was very confused.
Confused, yes. Why?
Like that time we had the book, I just like never really understood what they were saying.
Okay, good. They were speaking English, but you couldn't understand what they were saying. Any other person react in a similar way? You know they're speaking English, but you don't know exactly what they're saying.
It's like you need subtitles for a language you already speak.
Yeah, exactly. And one thing, when you watch the film, and I just ask you, you can go to Amazon and rent it for like $3. What you should do is put the closed caption subtitle on and have the text at the bottom of the screen. And for the most part, to the best of my recollection and attention, there is no moment in that production with Kenneth Branagh and Lawrence Fishburne in which they really changed the language of the play at all. They've edited out a number of scenes in the interest of time, but they are delivered basically word for word, just as it's written in the text. And what we're going to do when next week, I'll kind of wrap this up now. Next week, what we'll do on Monday is just talk about the play in general, where we'll maybe look at a line or two, but we just want to talk about, what the heck is going on? What's the setting? What's it all about? What's the conflict? Who are the main characters? What are they like? Why do people, why do they do what they do? Why do you think they do what they do? And so on and so forth. So next Monday, what we want to do is really get the lay of the land of this play. And we want to have a very clear understanding of those kind of basic dimensions of story or drama in terms of the characters, the setting, the conflict, the plot, and so on and so forth. Once we have that clear, once everybody has that clear, then we can start moving on to attack the language a little bit. And we can kind of, I think what we'll do is do it in concert, where we'll look at a clip from the film, and then we'll read the passage out loud, and we'll say, what the heck is being said here? What is being meant? So let me one more thing about Shakespeare before we move on, which is that there will be two types of homework that you'll be given for Shakespeare. The one for Monday next week is simply about answering the basic questions of what the play is about, the characters, what they're like, the setting, the situation, the conflict, and so on. Then the assignments after that are asking you to basically translate Shakespeare into your own language, right? So of course today you could go out to a bookstore and you could buy Shakespeare in modern English, which means that some editor has literally translated Shakespeare's 17th century English into our language. And instead of an editor doing that work for us, we're going to try to figure out what he's saying, because Shakespeare's language is poetry. He depends on myth. He depends on allegory. He depends on figurative speech all the time. So we're constantly in this act of trying to translate the symbolic language to clarify exactly what it is he's talking about. And we'll also talk about some of the key tropes and themes lurking there that his language depends on. And once you kind of see how he's working with his language, you'll see repetitions of themes that manifest in the language itself. Okay.
Professor.
Yes.
So for me, like when I've done Shakespeare in school, it's always been hard for me. So it's like always been something I've like kind of, dreaded. But anyways, when we do that part where we're trying to translate it into our own words, is it kind of like you just read the passage and try to translate it, and is it right or wrong? Like what if you just simply don't understand something? Like how do you get graded on that?
Okay, right or wrong? There's not completely absolutes unless, good question. If you're investing, first of all, by the time we get to that homework, we'll have already established a lot of understanding about the play. And obviously the play is long. It's not a particularly long play, but it's long enough where we're certainly not going to be focusing on every speech. We're going to boil it down to some key speeches where we, instead of trying to look at everything in a superficial way, we'll look at a handful of speeches in a way that has greater depth. And at that point, we'll already have discussed things. You've already read about the plot. You'll already have seen the film, and all these things are going to inform your understanding.
Yeah,
and of course,
that makes sense.
there's some elements of the play that are up to your own discretion about what you think. We've talked about interpretation. There are wrong answers. If what you're saying fundamentally contradicts what's there in front of you, that's a problem. And let me conclude with this. The last thing, the reason I've chosen for everyone to have the edition of Othello that I have asked you to purchase is precisely because it has great footnotes. It has great footnotes. And I know the last thing it's tough enough reading Shakespeare. Who the heck wants to read the footnotes? But what it does is basically it gives you, it provides little dictionary notations explaining the meaning of terms that are going to be foreign to you, and not just of single words, but even phrases, kind of idiomatic expressions that Shakespeare had available to him in his time that really aren't part of the English language today.
Oh, okay.
I think with all that combined, that should kind of answer it.
Okay,
Okay.
thanks.
So today, what I want to do, let me start at the end. I want to finish looking at the conclusion of the Odyssey. This really great climactic finale of that happens in books 21 and 22 with the contest. And as I've said in the module, that the little précis that I provided, I mean, from the opening page of the Odyssey, we know that, you know, Odysseus is going to succeed. It seems to be built into the character. He's the heroic protagonist of the story. Despite all the caveats about all the problems, all the setbacks, all the suffering he entails, the fact that he loses his men, we all get the sense that he's going to come back and rectify the situation. And what we don't know, of course, is exactly how he's going to do it. And this is rather one of the more interesting elements of the story, particularly that if the Odyssey is about the journey of Odysseus, the journey is really compacted into books 9 through about 12. And then in book 13, he returns to Ithaca. And then from books 13 to 20, we really have this very drawn out, slowly building drama toward the climax of the confrontation with the suitors. And he's already had this initial confrontation with the suitors as this beggar in his own household, going kind of deep cover, right? He's in this kind of undercover assignment for various reasons where virtually nobody knows who he is. And he only reveals himself very selectively to people, even to his own household. He does that very selectively and waits till the very last minute. And we'll talk a little bit about why that is. But then there's the contest and this and you know, dealing with the suitors. And the way it happens is very intriguing and rather unusual. And the suitors' reaction is incredibly odd and unusual. And we want to get at what that is all about. Let me ask this. What happens in, what is Penelope proposed to resolve the whole situation with the suitors? Right? Remember in book 1, where the camera comes in on the whole story at a kind of precipice. It's a moment where something has to happen on Ithaca. Penelope has to choose, a suitor has to be taken because Odysseus has not materialized. And we've talked about the implications of him not materializing, which is to say there are negative implications about why he's gone. Either he's dead, or if he's alive, that may even be worse. Why hasn't he made it home? So she proposes a contest to resolve the problem. What is the contest she proposes?
She says that like everyone, all the suitors, including him as a beggar, should try to string the bow of Odysseus, or like bend the bow, whatever how you say it, and
Yeah,
like
sure. So,
shoot it.
you know, unstrung the bow is like straight.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where the tension for the thing comes from, to be able to shoot the arrow. So to string it means you have to bend it into position.
Okay.
That makes it very taut and kind of dynamic. And
Yeah.
so
No, yeah. So that's, and then they should try to shoot it and see if they can hit every like target or every axer, I think it was. And she knows that only Odysseus can do that, pretty much. So he'll be the one she marries, or he'll be the one that wins the contest. Basically, whoever would have won it would have become the next.
yeah, so Penelope sets up what she thinks is a rigged contest, where she assumes that precisely because this is Odysseus's bow, that they're not going to be able to string it. So this is like another version of her weaving and unweaving that garment back at the beginning of the story where she was buying time to put off the suitors. Remember, she had said, when I finish this garment, I'll choose one of you. And of course, she would weave during the day when she was visible to everyone. And then at night, she would, when everybody was asleep, she would unweave. So she has these kind of sneaky, wily, cunning, resourceful attributes that are almost virtually identical to her husband. And Odysseus is a beggar for some reason. Does Penelope, so you said she rigs the contest so Odysseus can win, and one of the unusual things she does is to allow the beggar to participate alongside, remember the suitors are noblemen, right? The notion that this beggar would participate with them and somehow compete for Penelope, it seems to them like out of the question. Like he is not eligible as a beggar. You talk about the most eligible bachelor. That eligibility could just mean like someone who's going to be a good husband, but eligibility could also just mean you come from the appropriate class, you come from the correct blood, from the correct family to even have an opportunity to wed someone. So a beggar, you would think, is totally ineligible to participate. Someone other than Shoshana, does Penelope know that the beggar is Odysseus?
No.
No, and that's pretty important because she doesn't know what she's doing in giving the beggar an opportunity. She thinks she's just being generous, and the beggar has developed. He's gained her respect by the way he's carried himself in dealing with the suitors. How much more should we say here? Does Odysseus string the bow?
Yes.
Yes,
Good answer.
he does.
And then what does he do?
He shoots someone in the throat.
Before that, he does
Oh.
something important.
He shoots like the 10 cattle, whatever he's got to do. Before.
Yeah, so the two parts of the contest are, number one, to string the bow, and then they've lined up these axe handles. And in the description of the book, it's really hard to understand exactly what they're talking about. But when I've seen it filmed, the axe handles have like a little kind of loop through them, like a big eyelet kind of thing, a hole that then the Odysseus shoots the arrow through all the aligned axes, and then it hits a target. And then of course he does. So that's what it takes to win the contest. That's the key. And then what does he do after he shoots the arrow?
He shoots someone in the throat.
Yeah, he starts killing the suitors, right? Does Penelope know that it's Odysseus at that point?
I think yes, but because the way he was fighting,
Are there other opinions? Does Penelope know after the bow has been strung and the arrow has been fired, and then the attack, even the attack on the suitors, does she know that's Odysseus?
No, I'm pretty sure Odysseus reveals himself later to Penelope.
Yeah, so Penelope kind of drops out of the scene, right? Because then it becomes about Odysseus and Telemachus and Eumaeus, who have kind of contrived, and mainly it's Telemachus and Odysseus that are standing against the suitors, and they've assembled their weapons and so on. But Penelope kind of drops out of the scene, but there's no evidence at that moment that Penelope knows. And of course, Odysseus then has to reveal himself to Penelope and actually prove to her that he is in fact who he claims to be. And it's interesting that despite it's his bow and her whole logic. Hi, how are you? I'm in the middle of class.
One thing.
Yes.
I didn't eat any of my chicken noodle soup
But you
because
moved.
I didn't have anything to eat it with.
You didn't have a spoon.
No.
Oh my goodness. Right? Can I go back to class? How are you?
Good.
Oh boy. she couldn't have her chicken noodle soup because there was no spoon. Oh, the challenges. Um, you think the teachers could have found something? Thank you. Yeah. She's better looking than I am. That goes without saying. So Penelope doesn't know, and of course, the at the suitors being killed is really not the end of the story. The real end of the story is how it plays out with Odysseus and his wife, and they're still playing games with one another right up to the end. The issues with the bed, and she asks him to move the bed, and he gets offended because he said, this bed. What's the thing? What's the thing about the bed?
Doesn't she ask him to like move the bed, and he said that he can't?
Absolutely. And what does he say?
He said that they can't because it's like an olive tree or something like that.
Yeah. And he's really offended that she would ask him to move the bed, because the bed, well, it's a symbol of their relationship, right? And it's part of a tree that's growing up through like the middle of the house. It's literally like part of the foundation of the house, and it derives from the earth and the natural world. And there's this notion that their love is kind of like cosmically ordained. What do you call that when two people are like together and it's like true love? What do we call that? Where two people are destined to be with one another by fate or destiny.
Soulmates.
Yeah.
Soulmate?
Soulmate. That's good. So it seems the fact that the bed is a symbol of their relationship. Obviously, it's part of the conjugal aspect of the relationship, literally like sleeping sexually with one another. Um, but also more generally, just a symbol of their relationship, more broadly speaking. And it's something that's rooted in nature. And it seems to suggest that their relationship exists as a kind of like a natural part of the cosmic order of things, right? And he gets really incensed and irritated that his wife would ask him to move the bed, because she should know it shouldn't be able to be moved because it comes from the ground. And of course, this is like an insult to their whole relationship, that the bed could be movable, because the bed kind of is the relationship, and it's immovable because it's like a force of nature, or it's rooted in nature. And of course, this is the little game they play. And it's really unclear, you know since Odysseus plays games with who he is, even to his wife. There's a whole scene where he tells her a story about he's a sailor who's been out on many expeditions, and he just lies to her face, and he goes on and on making up this story. And it's unclear when Penelope really becomes aware that it's him, and maybe she knows in advance, but maybe she plays the game of Odysseus. She's disingenuous and doesn't let on that she knows it's him. And they have this kind of back and forth game with each other about, you could call it like pulling each other's legs. And it shows the kind of people they are, these kind of little bit sneaky, innocent sneaky, but then it also shows the kind of the relationship they have, that they can kind of play these games with each other and not be hurt by it and things like that. Okay, so we'll come back to that at the end. I hope to do this in an expeditious fashion. What I'd want to do right now, and I'm going to do it quickly, but there's a lot to cover, is a look at the opening lines, right? So he said these opening lines are like a microcosm, a view onto the entire book. Why are we looking at them now? Because you now should have the entire picture of the book in your mind, having read the whole thing. And once we come back to these opening lines, you can now see their significance, particularly in the way they frame the content of the book and point to what's really important. They're a microcosm in terms of the plot, but they're also a microcosm in terms of the key themes of the text. The first thing we're introduced to in these opening lines, which it's called a proem, which is kind of like a little prologue, is this dialogue, kind of one-sided dialogue between the poet and the muse. And we have to understand a little bit more clearly what's going on there. Then we discover very clearly that the proem describes the story, which is a journey home, right? Let you keep it simple. The story is about a journey home, but we discover that that journey, like human nature, really has two parts. Human nature consists of a body and a soul. It consists of a physical thing and a psychological thing. And the journey consists of a physical journey through time and space across the sea, but also a figurative journey or an invisible journey of the soul, or which is to say the development of one's psychology. When the soul develops, it's not going anywhere, it's developing, it's changing. And of course, one of the great questions is in this journey of Odysseus home, does he really change as a character? There's big dispute about that. And of course, this journey of the soul centers around this issue of curbing desires, right? Is he going to be able to, what did we say curbing desire meant? What did it mean? So Tiresias says, if you want to get home, if you want to reach the destination of your journey, you must curb your desire. What is he talking about there?
To discipline himself, like to not do certain acts.
Okay, good. To discipline himself to not do certain acts. And those acts could be anything. And the key thing is to not give in to one's impulses, to regulate one's impulses, curb, to moderate, to restrain, to self-govern, to have self-restraint, right? So kind of basic model of human action in the Odyssey that you see, everywhere. Political thought, the novel, which is that he needs to restrain himself internally of his impulses. You have a kid or your own life, you all know, if you don't restrain those impulses, which are going to have negative consequences, the world is going to externally constrain you or punish you for having acted them out. And sometimes the consequences of acting on our impulses are, in parenting language, they call the natural consequences. Instead of the parent punishing the kid does something and they break their toy, and then they're really upset that they broke their toy. The parent didn't have to have an artificial punishment. The punishment, quote unquote, becomes like the natural consequence of their actions. Like the toy gets broken, I don't know, gets knocked off the table, right? So if we don't regulate ourselves, there are going to be consequences. Either the gods are going to punish us or things are just not going to work out the way we want. Right? So this starts to deal with not the journey of the body through space, but the journey of the soul. And what we discover is that this whole journey is presented metaphorically of this ship out on the sea trying to find its way home, really being a metaphor for the soul trying to reach a certain type of maturity, and you might say fulfill its own nature. And it's this motif of the ship as a metaphor is one that is common in poetry and literature from ancient Greece up until, to some extent today, but it's certainly into the 18th, 19th century. So in ancient Greek literature, in dramas, in Platonic dialogues, you constantly see the ship as a metaphor for other things, particularly the ship as a metaphor for the self or for a city, kind of the rule of a political community. So it's no surprise that we find this metaphor or allegory, however we want to think about it there, because it was a very common one in ancient Greek literature. So if this journey is really about the soul, it has everything to do with human nature, or at least the aspect of human nature we're interested in, which is the psychological aspect of human nature, which the Greeks call the soul, which is the Greek word is psyche, and it's where we get our word psychology. We'll touch a little on the nature of the hero, which is really an extension of human nature, and we'll touch a little bit on the Homeric encyclopedia. Okay. So in the opening lines, we really have what's called a proem. And a proem is like a prologue or a preface, right? It's something that stands before the main body of the story. And typically, if you've ever picked up a book with a preface or a prologue, it's kind of like an introduction. Um, you'll notice that it will literally say preface, and then that preface will be separated out from the body of the text as a distinct thing, and it'll be indicated as such. What's interesting about the proem here as a kind of preface to the story is it's written in a way visually that's just continuous with the story. And you come to realize that what's being said here in these opening lines really stands distinct from the rest of the telling of the actual story. And what we see here is that the poet is not actually speaking to the audience. One element of the Homeric tales is they started out as oral tellings of stories, in which were essentially performances where the bard would sing the song to a group of people in the same way that we see it depicted in the palace of Alkinos, the same way as we see it depicted in Odysseus's palace, where bards sing songs as a form of entertainment to the people in the palace, right? So the text really has the flavor of an oral performance. And here, the poet is not speaking to the audience directly, right? He's speaking to the muse. So let me just read it really quickly. And we're going to look at these opening lines in a variety of different ways. It says, "Sing to me of the man, muse, the man of twists and turns." So he's making a kind of command here. He's demanding something of whom? Not the audience, but the muse. So we see clearly in this opening sentence, let's just say Homer is the narrator here. Homer is not speaking to the audience, to the spectators, to the listeners, and nor is he telling the story of Odysseus. He's asking the muse to sing to him of the man of twists and turns. After that, sing to me of what kind of man? The man of twists and turns, who is driven time and again off course. So you notice that while the plot overview here that's presented is really just a kind of extended descriptor of this man of twists and turns and the various attributes of his journey that really have to do with him. And it seems clear here that the focus of this story is about this guy, the man, right? Definitive article. It's about a human individual and their unusual characteristics, right? So let me just read it again. "Sing to me of the man, muse, the man of twists and turns, driven time and again off course. Once he had plundered the hallowed heights of Troy. Many cities of men he saw and learned their minds. Many pains he suffered, heart sick on the open sea, fighting to save his life and bring his comrades home. But he could not save them from disaster, hard as he strove. The recklessness of their own ways destroyed them all. The blind fools, they devoured the cattle of the sun, and the sun god blotted out the day of their return, period. Then launch out on his story, muse." So again, Homer, the whole time really, has been speaking not to us, but to the muse. Launch out on his story, muse, daughter of Zeus. Start from where you will. Sing for our time too. Why is Homer speaking to the muse? What is the purpose here? What's going on? First of all, who is the muse?
You see somewhere here, the muse, daughter of Zeus.
Okay, good. And what's the significance of that? Very good. So the muse is what? Is she a mere mortal? Is the muse a mere mortal?
No.
She's a what? Go on, folks. She's a what? As the daughter of Zeus, she's what?
A goddess.
Yes, a goddess.
Oh, goddess.
What would you call? So he's making a speech, not to us, but to a goddess. What would you call when a human being makes a speech to a god? What kind of speech is that?
Like a prophecy, maybe?
Not quite,
I don't
because he's
know.
speaking to the muse to get the inspiration to be able to tell the story, and it's the story that's going to be the prophecy. It's the story that he's going to be the mouthpiece for. That really, what's the claim? That the story is not coming from him, but the story is coming from the muse. So that much is the prophecy. What do we? But so the prophecy is when the god gives you information and you tell everybody about the information. But what do you call it when you speak to the god?
Is it a prayer?
Yeah, you could call it a prayer or a hymn, right? Or a kind of an ode, a kind of homage to the goddess, respectfully asking, what is he asking the goddess for, really? Sing to me of the man, muse. Launch out on his story. Start from where you will, sing for our time too. What is he demanding of the muse?
Like he's demanding permission to speak. I think so.
Close. Whose story is this really?
Odysseus?
Yeah, that's who the story's about. Who's got like the authorship or the ownership of this story?
Is it Athena? Because she's the one who kind of like set it all into motion, like trying to fix.
That's reasonable because she is the daughter of Zeus, but the muses are specific daughters of Zeus, and they're called the muses, and we'll talk more about that in a minute. So that's a good guess, but no, it's not Athena. But you're on the right path. Whose story is this? Is this Homer's story? Is he the author?
Yeah. Isn't he? Isn't he like the actual author? Yeah.
Within the frame of this proem or this preface, who is the true author? Whose story is this? Sing to me of the man, muse. Sing to me the story of Odysseus, muse. Wait, I'm confused. I thought Homer, imagine this is a real performance, an actual performance. I thought Homer was going to sing to us, the audience. Here, Homer is asking the muse to sing to him.
So the story is for the muse.
Yes, the true author of the story is the muse.
Is a muse.
And when he tells the story, what's the idea here? That he's literally being inspired by the muse in a kind of prophetic way, as a kind of a prophet, to be able to tell the story, and that he is just a mouthpiece for the muse, in a sense that in a fundamental way, the story is not his, but it's hers. Now, whether people literally took this to be the case, or whether this is just a kind of trope of storytelling, it depends. But this is part of what's going on here.
Wait, so this is Homer being inspired by the muse to say the prophecy that she's gonna say, basically?
Yes. And if inspire is Latin, and it literally means to like breathe into the person, right? So inspiration in its most literal meaning is to like have the spirit or the breath of the god breathed into you in the same way like Adam is brought to life, right? So the breath of the story, you could say, comes from her, and he is just retelling what he has been given by the muse, right? And so that's one of the main points. And so everything we see here, even though this is a kind of a plot summary, you could say right here, what we're really looking at is sing to me about the man and tell me his story. And what kind of man is it? He's a man who went through all this, right? And you see how the plot here that's described is really subordinate. It's a modifier of this man, right? And of course, it's interesting that Odysseus's name is not used here, and he's just called the man. It makes the story slightly more universal because it doesn't specify, his actual name, which doesn't come until a few pages later. So just a couple important things. The Muses are the 9 daughters of Zeus, each of whom inspires a different human discipline within all the arts and sciences, right? So essentially they inspire they inspire the disciplines of the mind, the disciplines of the hands, all those things that human beings do. They make things, they make stories, they make art buildings, they make sculptures, they make music, they write philosophy, they write dramas, they do astronomy. All of these different domains of kind of human use of human intelligence in one form or another were understood as inspired by the muses, so that each domain, like history or philosophy, had its own muse that inspired it. So the muse of history is Clio. So sometimes you read a history book and you actually see a reference to Clio, just a kind of an echo of the Greek origin, right? The very word music comes from the word muse. And in the most general sense, music just means the thing inspired by the muses. Calliope is the name for the specific, she's not mentioned here, of course, right? We don't see any mention of her name, but Calliope is understood traditionally as the muse of epic poetry. So the Odyssey is a work of epic poetry, and therefore the muse being invoked here, the muse he's talking to is Calliope. And Calliope, there's an old-fashioned instrument called a calliope, and I can't even remember what it looks like or does, but you can Google it. And when you Google that name, you'll probably get an image of the instrument. But in Greek, calliope literally means beautiful voiced, right? Or beautiful voice, right? So it is kind of perfectly harmonious with the kind of musicality of the verse of the Odyssey in Greek, right?
Wait, so this muse that he's talking to is Calliope, not Athena?
Yes. Yes.
Oh, okay.
Athena, so let's clarify. Athena is a daughter of Zeus. Zeus got around. He had many daughters, right? But Athena is not a muse, right? She doesn't inspire any of the kind of disciplines of the mind or of human achievement. So that's, yes, important distinction. And it's not obvious because the name Calliope is not mentioned. Okay. So then you notice that this whole kind of plot summary is framed by these demands made by Homer of the muse. Sing to me of Odysseus and his journey so I can tell it to all the people, which is to say the class, right? Our class, right? And then he concludes, launch out on his story. What does it mean to launch out on his story?
It's like kind of like launching on a journey. Like it's like depicting his journey in a way.
Okay, good. So you're getting to the metaphorical content of it. Let's take it really literally. What does it mean to launch out on the story? It means to what?
Tell the story.
Not just tell it,
To-
but to
To
blank.
begin.
Yeah,
Beginning
to start.
to start.
We're at the beginning of everything, right? So notice it. If he's asking her to launch out onto the story, it means the story has not actually started yet. And it doesn't start until the next page where you see, every man but one. I think the line is every man but one has come home, but one man still remains floating, out in the Mediterranean and Aegean. And that man turns out to be Odysseus, right? And then, of course, the launch makes reference to the nature of a story, not only a journey, but a journey on a ship. And it's a ship. I mean, today we've got rockets that get launched into the sky, right? But in their day, to launch something, it would be a ship that would be launched into the water, literally. And that word is still used that way today when you christen a ship and then you launch it out. from the dock, the dry dock into the water. So it has this great resonance with the substance of the story. And he's just saying, tell the story. And then he says two things that are rather funny. He says, start from where you will. Start. So you see, launch is a start. It's a beginning. So he's reiterating, it clarifies the meaning of launch. Begin from where you will. Now, what's interesting about that? Where do we begin the narrative?
Like 10 years after Troy, so like in the middle of it.
Yeah, and you know, so classically it's understood as en media res, in the middle of the thing. And of course, we're really almost toward the end of the thing, but you can still, since we're not at the very end, we begin in the middle. So the irony here is, you know, he says, Muse, I don't want to make too many demands of you, Muse. You can begin wherever you want. And where does she begin? She does not begin at the beginning. She begins almost at the end. And this gives us a little nub in it highlights the narrative structure, the way in which we don't begin at the beginning. And we could have several classes on, you know, why we think we start out at this stage. We've talked about a kind of heightened drama, things of that nature. And then he says this, his last demand of the muse. He says, sing for our time too. Sing for our time too. What does he mean by that? What is our time? Let's put it this way. The story is about a period in Greece from around 1400 BC. That's 1400 BC to about 1200 BC, right? The story was written down around 800 BC. I don't know, 400 to 600 years after the events it describes, right? So this is a kind of ancient history for the Greeks. This is old news. This is not something happened currently. This isn't like current events. The world that's depicted in Homer is a world that the Greeks no longer lived in. I think we said it's the equivalent of like our Wild West. In the 20th century, Westerns took a kind of center stage in popular imagination in terms of storytelling. And the interesting thing is, in the 20th century, we were becoming, you know, very modern, technological, so on and so forth. And of course, for some reason, we have this yearning to look back toward a century of a simpler moment when things are in certain ways more primitive, and the complexities of modern society don't exist. Sing for our time too. What time is it?
Kind of like the time he's living right now.
Yeah, what's another name for the time we're living in right now?
Present.
Yeah, the present. So we might put it this way. Sing for our time, sing for the present. Sing for the present. Sing for our time. Now, which present does this refer to?
Like 800 BC
It could.
or 1200, did you say?
No. So
Oh.
yeah, it's acknowledging the moment. It's acknowledging the moment in which the story is actually being recited, as opposed to the time, the narrative time that it actually takes place in. You see that? And this is why this is one more reason why we're not actually in the story yet, right? We're actually there in the present. This is a kind of frame to the whole, an outer frame, right? The story is like a picture. It's a representation of another world in another time in another place, a Greece that's no longer, right? An old age where things were different and men were men and women were women, right? And sing for our time is the present. And that time could either be when Homer wrote the story down, or it could be what? What could the our time refer to?
Maybe the future, like he's a time where people want to read it.
Future.
Which could you explain that a little more? Who? Here's the question: who is the our that's being referred to? Who is the we?
Calliope as well, like the muse as well as him.
And who else?
Homer.
Sing, no, what he's saying, sing
Oh.
for our time. I mean, she's a goddess. She's like immortal. She doesn't have to deal with time. What beings deal with time? Human beings. Homer's immortal, right? Who is the we?
I can say humanity, the future.
Let's be a little more specific. Any other last thoughts? Okay. I think the we, it could be, you know, this story was written down, but I mean, if you think of this story in terms of a performance, whether it's either an oral performance or literally just the performance of reading the text in the present. When do you read it? You read it in the present. And when you read it in the present, the story sings for our time. Who could be the hour? The hour is whoever is having the story recited for them, right? So this story is not for people of the past. It's not just a story about the past. For people of the past, this story is, if it's being recited in the present, it's being recited for our time, right? It seems to suggest a kind of universality of the story, that the story has the ability to live on and that it's relevant to a new time, right? Okay. Oh my God, we're tight on time here. What I want to focus on here. I'm just going to say a few words about this. So if you watch the videos, I've described something called the Homeric Encyclopedia. Now, the word encyclopedia is Greek. It combines the word in a circle and education. And a circle for the Greeks is an image of a whole, something complete, something in its totality. So an encyclopedia, you think about having encyclopedic knowledge, you have total, you have complete knowledge, right? So an encyclopedia implies like a kind of totality, a kind of complete body of knowledge or understanding or of education. The word paideia means education in Greek, and particularly it has to do with raising people and cultivating them to fulfill their nature as human beings, develop their own excellences, right? And I call this book the Homeric Encyclopedia because Homer is the Bible for the Greeks, and that in this text, what is the Bible? The Bible is the book. It has a kind of comprehensive description of what's necessary for your own self-development, your own paideia, your own education. And one thing we see in this book is a kind of full range of the different types of things in the world, Greeks and non-Greeks, gods, men, beasts, that reiterate that cosmic hierarchy that we talked about going all the way back to Genesis and the Mesopotamian kind of vision of the world, where there's a cosmic hierarchy with gods at the top, man in the middle, and nature at the bottom. And what we see in this journey, right, is a kind of kaleidoscopic look at all these different types of people from different places, or different people in terms of their different character, virtuous, base, noble, not noble, peasants, kings, men, women, and they all have their distinct attributes, and they all act in accord with their different kind of places in the order of thing. And we don't just have people, we've got gods, we've got benevolent gods, we've got gods who are punishing Odysseus, we've got beasts like Scylla and Charybdis, and this whole range of kind of, you might say, everything you might be able to find in the world is all kind of compacted in this book, right? And when we look at these opening lines, we see a whole range of things that really start to comprise this kind of Homeric encyclopedia that the book is intending on being kind of all inclusive in terms of human experience. And what's more inclusive in terms of experience than than a type of journey where a man leaves his home and encounters all these unusual ways of life on the way. He had the goal to fight at Troy. He had the goal to get back home, but he also seemed to have the goal to explore and different places in the world. And of course, the Mediterranean in the ancient world was understood. All the civilizations were sitting around the Mediterranean, and this was understood as the kind of totality of the known world. So what do you have? Odysseus going to all these different islands, encountering these different types of people, types of beings. It's as if he's encountering everything in the known world. And one of the interesting things that is said here in these opening lines is many cities of men he saw and learned their minds. Many cities of men he saw and learned their minds, which means it seems to be the case that one really important element of this journey, apart from getting home, apart from conquest, apart from the challenges of character, of curbing one's desire, one of the elements is that this journey is about exploration and experiencing the new and being exposed to ways of life other than the life on Ithaca, right? We encounter all these different ways of life that are to varying degrees compatible or not compatible with Odysseus as a Greek. Notice he saw and he learned their minds. It suggests Odysseus is curious, that he wants to learn things. He wants to know. Aristotle, in the beginning of his Metaphysics, he says, because the human being is the rational animal with reason, with intellect, all human beings desire to know. Making a really important claim there. Human beings don't just desire to be ambitious, they don't just desire to be recognized. They don't just want food, sex, drugs, and rock and roll. They also have another desire that isn't always recognized, particularly in our culture. They have the natural desire to know and learn things because they have the ability to do it. Human beings are curious. And what's interesting about this line is it's no different than the curiosity we see on display in Eve picking the fruit from the tree. But there's a different emphasis here of a different type of knowledge, of a kind of exposure to the world, a kind of comprehensive, encyclopedic exposure to the world. Okay. I'm going to try to do this as quickly as I can because we want to look at the reading and get on with it. So, sing to me of the man. What is the primary topic of this text? If we take this opening proem or preface as presenting us with the main topic of the book or of the epic poem, what's the main topic here?
Odysseus's journey. So Odysseus.
I would say yes and no. I would say it's even more fundamental than that. But yeah. So Odyssey literally means the story of Odysseus, right? It's come to mean a term for journey or the journey of Odysseus. We talk about people have an odyssey. They have some type of journey, self-exploration, self-discovery, things like that. I think the central theme here is this man. And it seems to suggest that the central theme of the entire book has to do with human nature in general, right? What human beings are fundamentally like is constantly on display in this text. And then more specifically, that Odysseus is not just any man, but he's a certain specific special type of man that's distinct from from average humanity, right? He is a true individual, right? Today we use this word individual and we say everybody's an individual because everyone's individual, you know, it's just kind of a part of our democratic ethos. But throughout most of history, when you call someone an individual, it means that they differentiate themselves from other human beings. They differentiate themselves from like the ordinary mass of people by, and how do people differentiate themselves? They do exceptional things that gets them recognized as distinct from, you know, the average, from the norm. And it seems to be that this story is really, notice, sing to me of the man muse, the man of twists and turns, right? It's not the journey of twists and turns. Of course, the journey takes twists and turns, but it's about the man. And of course, it's from this focus on human nature from which the journey is generated. And it seems like the journey is not just the physical, you know, travel across the ocean on a boat, but that the journey is also just the journey of life. And in this case, the journey of a specific human being's life. So I'm going to try to keep moving through here, and I'd like to ask more questions, but I want to get through this. So the Greek account of human nature, right? Let's say this book is about a man. If it's about a man, it's about human nature, right? And the Greeks have a developed understanding of what human nature is about that later in Plato and Aristotle in the 4th and 3rd centuries, 5th and 4th centuries BC, they really develop a very explicit concept of human nature. But you can see that on display here, and you could make an argument that actually they appropriated a lot of their conception of human nature from precedents, prior precedents like Homer, right? So for the Greeks, human nature consists of a body and a soul, right? And the soul is that invisible thing that can't exist without the body, but it's more than the mere body. And soul, Greek word psyche, that's where we get the word psychology, which is the science of the soul, or the science of that part of ourself that doesn't have a simple material existence, right? They call it a soul. We would call it like our self. And when we think of ourself, we think of like our heart and mind. And of course, we use those words metaphoric, you know, heart metaphorically. We mean something more than just our physical body. We mean something who we really are in terms of our character. You might even say in terms of our personality. The Greek word for soul, just the soul is the thing that animates any living thing. So in Latin, the Latin word for soul is anima, and it's where we get a word like animate object or animated. So therefore, things that have souls, they live, they breathe, they develop, they grow, and they mature. Particularly human beings grow and hopefully mature, right? And that's the result of the development of their soul or the development of their character through experience, through getting exposed to this journey of life or this journey from Troy. So what's interesting is there's a very interesting parallelism. Since the human being consists of a physical body and an immaterial soul, and when we talk about an immaterial soul, we don't mean like something magical. We just mean that thing that's hard, even today, it's hard to explain what the self is. It's something that's not simply physical. Um, Yourself isn't just what your brain it's what your brain does, right? And what we care about with human beings is what the brain does in terms of creating behavior, creating speech, and creating, you could say, personality or human character, right? So here I'm not going to go everything here. I just kind of color coded this. With the body and the soul, we have two journeys here. We have a journey of the body through time and space, and we have the journey of the soul, which consists of a certain type of self-development. And you'll notice that there's a very interesting parallelism, is that neither of these journeys is linear. Neither of them go forward straight from the beginning to end. Every journey has a goal, right? On one hand, the physical journey is to get home, and the psychological journey is one of self-development, to curb his desires, right? And we see elements. So here in the blue, I've got like physical elements of the journey. Where they do things physically, they plunder, they're driven time and again off course, they devour the cattle of the sun, so on and so forth. And then in the yellow, I have things that are more psychological. So notice it's not the journey of twists and turns, it's the man of twists and turns, which is to say his character, his psychology is built up of twists and turns. And so here's the thing, we might say that the reason that the physical journey consists of twists and turns, and they're driven time and again off course, which is really just another way of saying twists and turns. Why does that happen? It happens precisely because we're dealing with this human being of twists and turns. And because of his psychological complexity, it results in the physical complexity of the journey in not getting directly home. Okay, so a couple more things, and we'll look at the ending here. We're tight on time. So there's a literal and a figurative journey, and the literal journey tracks the external journey of the body, and the figurative journey tracks the internal journey of Odysseus's soul, or just his psychological self-development, right? And obviously there's an interaction there, because with the physical journey, he comes in contact with experiences that affect him psychologically, right? So the two go hand in glove. So there's some great expressions that get at this relationship between the destination of someone's life, the destination of their actual journey, connected with their interior nature, their psychological nature. So Heraclitus, he was a famous pre-Socratic philosopher from the 7th century BC. He said a man's character is his fate, or we could say a woman's character is their fate. And what is your fate? It's your destination on your journey called life, right? And why is your character your fate? Does anyone want to take a stab at that? Why is your character lead to your destination in life? What's the connection? When we're talking about one's character, what are we talking about?
How he behaves.
Yeah. So how one responds to experience, whether one curbs one desire, one does the right thing, whether one does the wrong thing. And, what does your character do? Your character shapes your actions, and your actions shape your course on the journey of your life, right? So whatever type of character you have, it's going to shape how you act, and your actions are going to shape the direction your life goes into. So you can see a clear connection. And one thing kind of being implied here is you are what you desire, right? Odysseus has the desire to get home, and that drives him to get home. But he's also has other competing desires. And this is one of the challenges here, is that he has a series of competing desires that are in conflict with oneself. And that's why he's the man of twists and turns. And that's why, for example, his journey takes all these detours, we could call it. Because he has many facets to his character, he has many motives and many desires. And because he's got many desires and many motives, many goals, the journey is about getting home in a simple sense, but it's also about all these other kind of subordinate journeys that he takes in terms of his own self-development. Evident when it says, for example, many cities he saw and learned their minds. It clearly suggests that part of the goal of the journey is not just to get home, but to actually have certain types of experiences. Could we just, oh my goodness. You know what? Maybe next Monday we'll have to finish, because we really need to look at those last lines of the of the Odyssey, the last couple passages from the last few books. So we'll just finish with this. Uh, this is a poem by Alexander Pope from the 17th century, right? In which he uses the ship and the sea allegorically to talk about the character of a human being. So you've got a boat on the ocean, and it's an allegory for the life of a human being, and in particular, the psychological life of a human being. And it really seems to perfectly parallel what we're getting at in these opening lines of this poem. And I think when you read this, it's even more clear than the Odyssey in making these parallels between the ship on the ocean and the psychology of the human being. So could somebody read this for us? I'll make this a little bigger. Who'd like to read this?
I can.
Go for it.
If you want. On life's vast ocean, diversely we sail, reason the card, but passion is the gale. Nor God alone in the still calm we find.
I'm sorry, Shoshana, you cut out there.
Yeah,
for a second. Could you
sorry.
start from the beginning? That's okay.
Yeah. On life's vast ocean, diversely we sail, reason the card, but passion is the gale. Nor God alone in the still calm we find. He mounts the storm and walks upon the wind. Passions, like elements, though born to fight, yet mixed and softened in his work unite. These 'tis enough to temper and employ, but what composes man can man destroy? Suffice that reason, keep to nature's road. Subject, compound them, follow her and God. Love, hope, and joy, fair pleasures, smiling train, hate, fear, and grief, the family of pain. These mixed with art and to do bounds confined, make and maintain the balance of the mind. The lights and shades, whose well-accorded strife gives all the strength and color of our life. Pleasures are ever in our hands or eyes, and when in act they cease, in prospect rise, present to grasp and future still to find, the whole employ of body and of mind. All spread their charms, but charm not all alike. On different senses, different objects strike. Hence different passions more or less inflame, as strong or weak the organs of the frame. And hence one master passion in the breast, like Aaron's serpent swallows up the rest.
Okay, great. So notice, let's just establish some important points here. Number one, he's using a ship and certain parts of the ship as a metaphor for the human soul, human psychology. And number one. Number two, the central drama he depicts of human psychology is a conflict between reason and the passions, or a conflict between the passions themselves, right? So if we go back to this just for a moment, we talked about this in Curbing Our Desires, that the Greeks conceive of the human being has a body and a soul, and then within the soul, we have a rational part of the soul and a passionate part of the soul, and that the two are potentially in conflict with oneself. And that for the Greeks and for Alexander Pope as well, because he's a kind of neoclassicist, the proper model of the soul in order to regulate our actions and to regulate our lives involves curbing our desires, and that reason is the thing that can adjudicate between our desires and curb them, right? And so the problem is the passions are blind. The passions don't see the consequences of what they want. And you can only need to think of examples in your own life where you have the impulse to do something that you want to do really badly, but intellectually you know that the consequences, if you give into that impulse, are not going to be positive. And sometimes your impulses get the better of you and you learn the hard way, right? Trial by experience, right? So the solution then is that reason is able to foresee the consequences of our actions. And therefore, having good character or doing the right thing or being virtuous involves reason regulating the passions or adjudicating between them, which means judging. So you have different passions and that pull you in different directions. And reason decides, well, this is an appropriate impulse to act on because this will be the consequence. Or it says that this will be appropriate to act on. So when you fail to curb your desires, you become a slave to your passions, meaning you've like turned your will over to your impulses, which is not going to be beneficial for you as the Greeks understand it. If you're a bohemian, you have a different conception of all this. So therefore, reason has to regulate the passions. It has to guide. It should be the guide of our actions. That's the key. It's not that the passions are intrinsically bad or that there's anything wrong with them. It's that they can't see the consequences of the actions that they inspire, and reason can. Like reason is kind of the thing that sees things metaphorically. Okay, and so how does Homer, and the Greeks generally, how does Homer depict Odysseus's journey? It's a struggle between his impulses and his reason. We looked, for example, at the incident with Polyphemus where he gives away his name. Why did he give away his name in that instance? Does anyone remember?
Because of his hubris. So like he wants to prove that he did something and he wants the world to know that it was him.
Yeah, so he was determined to gain recognition, to gain honors, to gain glory for this little human being, this ingenious human being defeating this giant who is the son of a god. And he wants his props from the world. And of course, it gets him in trouble because he's given into his impulses. And particularly, I think we talked about it, he's given into his thumos, this kind of spiritedness, this self-assertiveness, this element of the human being that wants recognition from others, wants acceptance from others. Thumos is intrinsically a social passion because we want to be seen by other people, and therefore we do things to get attention from them. And sometimes those things that we do to get attention are reckless, right? So we can see it in Odysseus, and I'm sure we can understand that in our own lives. So if you look at everything that Pope says here, we see a reiteration of this idea that is really well developed in Greek literature and Homer in particular, of that the human life consists of this kind of a permanent strife, a permanent struggle between reason on the one hand and passions on the other. And that the real destination in life is not a physical destination. It's learning to regulate oneself. It's learning to develop moderation, right? By definition, moderation means, kind of impulse control, right? So that's that deals with the conflict of the passions. But what we want to clarify in the 3 minutes we have left is the metaphor here, or the allegory. He says, on life's vast ocean, diversely we sail, reason the card, but passion is the gale. And then he makes reference to the Christian God, which doesn't really help us for our purposes, but we can leave it at that. So there's a literal element to this journey, and the figurative element piggybacks on all the literal aspects. So what does this journey literally consist of? The physical journey, what does it consist of? For Odysseus, or for what Pope describes here? What does Odysseus's journey consist of?
Like I meant curbing his desires and growing and maturing.
So Odysseus is a body and a soul. The embodied part of the journey of his body consists of what?
Going back home.
Yes. He and his men going back home. The destination of the journey is what?
Ithaca?
Yeah, home. Home,
Home.
right? Stupid questions. How do they get there? Obvious
But-
questions here.
By sea, like by the ship.
Yes, by the ocean. On the ocean. Right? And what on the ocean gets them home?
A ship?
Yeah, a ship, right? So we've got a ship, we've got and the men on it, Odysseus, we've got the ocean, the thing on which they travel, and we've got the destination of the journey, which is home. All these just straightforward physical attributes. So what Pope is doing is taking all these physical or literal elements and seeing the metaphorical meaning of them. And I think what he's seeing in his poem, this essay on man, is really consistent with what we actually see in Odysseus, because Odysseus's journey is not really just a physical journey, it's a psychological one. So he says, on life's vast ocean, what is the ocean a metaphor for or a symbol for? If we could just go 2 more minutes. He says it right there, on life's vast ocean. The ocean is what? As a symbol. It's a symbol of what? The boat is a symbol of Odysseus and his psychology, his soul.
The ocean symbolizes life itself.
Yeah. And what's the interesting thing about the ocean? When think about that scene where he looks out on the ocean looking for home and he's just looking across the ocean. The ocean is open. The ocean has forces that are beyond your control. The ocean has no guidelines. The ocean has no stoplights. It has no double yellow lines. It's just completely a vast expanse in which you can go in any direction, right? And because human beings have choice, because they can be the shapers of their own destiny, the ocean seems to be a metaphor for human life in that we can go in any direction. We should go home. We should go in one direction, right? And down here he talks about, following the correct road somewhere. We're supposed to use our reason to follow the correct course, right? The correct path through life, make the correct choices, right? The ocean could be life. It also could be a metaphor for all those forces that are beyond our control that impinge on the course of our lives. Also could be a metaphor for nature itself. Those circumstantial things that are beyond our control that impinge on us in various ways. The boat is a metaphor for us, our psyche. And he says, reason is the card. What the heck is he talking? The card is a part of a boat. Does anyone know what it is? And we don't use this word card, but it's shaped similar to a card. What's the thing that steers the boat? Like an old-fashioned boat.
The rudder.
Yeah, a rudder. What does a rudder do? It shifts back and forth and it changes your direction. It changes your trajectory. It changes your course, right? So what is he saying? Reason is the rudder. What should reason be doing? It should be what?
Determine which direction you go.
Yeah, it should be the guide to our actions. You think of curbing our desires is all about using our reason to be able to direct our actions in the correct way or direct the course of our lives in the correct way. But he says passion is the gale. What is a gale? What is a gale?
Wind.
Yeah. So he's got a metaphor here of a sailboat, right? And it's our impulses, it's our passions that propel the ship forward. But it's reason that guides it in the right direction. And if you look at the journey of Odysseus, you see he's compelled forward by impulses. His desire to get home is not just a rational decision. He has a powerful emotional impulse to want to go home. He has a powerful emotional impulse to want to avoid death. He has a powerful emotional impulse to have sex or to plunder or to gain wealth or to eat. But we need reason to guide those passions in the appropriate way so they don't lead to either us not getting home or us getting home late, so on and so forth, or getting shipwrecked somewhere out on the open sea. Okay. Do people see how this allegory is working? Allegory is just a kind of symbolic treatment here. We have this literal physical journey on a boat on the ocean. Do we see the way in which this is a metaphor for human life and kind of the psychological mechanics of it?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. All right. So we're going to call it right there. And what we're going to do is on Monday, we will start Othello on Wednesday. And on Monday, we're going to read 21 and 22 from the Odyssey, because we have to get to the conclusion of it. We can't leave that hanging. Questions, comments, issues before we go? All right. Ladies and gentlemen, have a great night, and I will see you all on Monday. Thank you.